I knew something was wrong the moment she walked through the ICU doors. ICU nurses talk about the look all the time, sometimes jokingly, sometimes with a seriousness that creeps into your bones. But we all know exactly what it means. It's the look a patient has when their body is holding on by a thread, when the alarms don't need to be ringing yet, because something deeper, something older in our instincts, is already pulling at us. And she had it. The moment her eyes met mine, before I even checked her chart, before I hooked her to a single monitor, my gut whispered, "Stay alert. This one is different." I was halfway through a night shift that had already stretched me thin. The ICU was busy enough to feel suffocating, but not chaotic enough to distract me from the tension that had been building in my chest all night for reasons I couldn't explain. I remember looking at the clock, 2:14 a.m., that strange hour when the hospital feels both too quiet and too loud at the same time. The vents hummed, machines blinked steadily, distant footsteps echoed in the hallway. And then the sliding doors at the end of the unit opened, and two nurses from the ED wheeled in a woman who looked like she had lived 3 lifetimes worth of pain in a single day. Her name was Marlene, early 60s, frail, but with a presence that made you straighten your spine without thinking. Her hands trembled slightly on the blanket, not from the chill of the hospital air, but from something deeper. Exhaustion layered on top of fear, layered on top of resignation. She didn't look confused. She didn't look panicked. She looked like she understood something none of us did yet. And that understanding was heavy in her gaze. The ED nurse gave me the rundown. Vitals not alarming, but unstable enough to raise concern. Unusual respiratory pattern, some chest discomfort, elevated markers, but nothing that screamed emergency. But I wasn't listening to the numbers. I was watching her eyes. They weren't darting around the room like most anxious patients. They were fixed, steady, and far away, as if she was looking at something we couldn't see. We say, ICU nurses know the look, because we've watched it happen too many times. We've seen people hold on by sheer will. We've seen them fight invisible battles. And sometimes, rarely, but unmistakably, we've seen them walk in with the quiet awareness that something inside them has crossed a threshold. When a patient comes in with that look, you drop any assumption that this will be a routine case. I greeted her gently, tried to get a read on her, but she only smiled faintly as if she didn't want to burden me with whatever she was feeling. That alone set off another internal alarm. Patients who are truly scared cling to you, ask questions, seek reassurance. She wasn't doing any of that. She seemed like she was preparing herself for something, and the weight of that made my stomach tighten. We transferred her to the ICU bed, hooked her to the monitors, started the standard assessments. Nothing in the numbers matched what my instincts were screaming. Her oxygen saturation wasn't ideal but stable, heart rate a little high but not concerning. Blood pressure hovering in a gray zone, but nothing we hadn't managed before. Everything was borderline yet tolerable. And yet, I couldn't shake it. The ED notes mentioned patient appears fatigued and distressed, but that wasn't the right word. Distress is loud. Distress is visible. Marlene was quiet, too quiet, and her silence carried meaning. She maintained eye contact with me longer than most patients do. Each time I adjusted her leads or checked her line, she watched me with this expression that suggested she was studying me, analyzing my reactions, seeing whether I understood before she said anything. Finally, when the room settled and the ED staff left, I pulled a chair next to her bed and tried again. "Marlene, can you tell me what's going on? What brought you here tonight?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because she was deciding how much of the truth to share. And in that moment, I felt something shift in the air, like the entire room held its breath. She said softly, "I've been feeling strange for days, like something inside me wasn't keeping up anymore. I can't explain it very well." She paused. "But when I woke up tonight, I knew I had to come here. I just knew." People underestimate how often the body knows before the tests do. And when a patient says, "I just knew," especially with that eerie clarity. You listen. You don't brush it off as anxiety. You don't categorize it as vague discomfort. You give it weight. As she spoke, I watched her breathing pattern, not labored, not rapid, but inconsistent. Subtle pauses, slight shifts in rhythm. Nothing I could chart as abnormal, yet everything about it felt wrong. I checked her hands. Her skin was cool, maybe too cool. Her pulse was weaker than the monitors suggested. Her color was slightly off in a way only an ICU nurse would notice. I reviewed her labs again, looking for anything to confirm my unease. Everything was borderline but never crossed a critical threshold. The attending physician had glanced at her chart earlier and didn't seem concerned. "Let's monitor," he had said, which is perfectly reasonable on paper but doesn't calm your instincts when every part of you is bracing for impact. I went back into her room and found her watching the door like she expected someone, or something, to walk through it. When she noticed me, she smiled weakly again. "Sorry," she whispered. "I'm trying not to make your night harder." I shook my head. "You're not making anything harder. I'm here for you. Whatever you're feeling, you can tell me." She nodded, took a slow breath, and then said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You've seen people like me before, haven't you? People who come in looking fine, but aren't fine." She wasn't asking. She was stating it, gently, knowingly. It's moments like that when all your years of training and experience collide with the human truth staring you in the face. Yes, I had seen people like her before. And yes, it scared me how precisely she recognized that. I didn't want to tell her that. Instead, I said, "You're safe here. Whatever's happening, we'll take care of you." She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, they glistened. Not with tears, but with a kind of acceptance. Not defeat. Acceptance, like she had already made peace with something. I checked her vitals for the 5th or 6th time that hour, but they still didn't reflect the growing tension in the room. ICU nurses know how to read the space around a patient, their breathing, their posture, the subtle tremors, the way they respond to stimuli. It's almost an unspoken language. And every signal she gave off told me she was closer to a crisis than any monitor cared to reveal. I paged the physician again, trying to sound objective and not like a nurse guided by intuition. "Her vitals are stable, but clinically she's presenting differently," I said carefully. "Something's off." He sounded tired, like most night shift physicians do. "Let's watch for trends. Call me if anything changes." Part of me wanted to push harder, but I've been in this field long enough to know the battle between gut instinct and objective data is an uphill one. You can't demand aggressive intervention without evidence, but you also can't ignore what your instincts are screaming. When I stepped back into Marlene's room, she opened her eyes and whispered, "It's getting worse, isn't it?" She didn't mean the numbers. She meant the feeling. I sat on the edge of her bed, not something I do often, and said, "I'm not going anywhere. I want you to tell me everything you're feeling, even if it seems small." She nodded. "My chest feels heavy. Not painful, just heavy. And I feel like I'm fading, even though I'm still awake." Again, those were not symptoms you could chart neatly, but they were symptoms you should never ignore. If anything, those intangible sensations are often the clues we rely on most in the ICU. I increased the frequency of her vitals checks. I reviewed her chart repeatedly. I triple-checked her lines, her intake, her labs. Every nurse instinct I had was active, and I trusted them more than anything. Around 3:20 a.m., something changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but subtly, like the room itself tensed. Her breathing pattern shifted again, more noticeable this time. Her hands felt colder. Her color dipped further into a shade that made the back of my neck prickle. I alerted the charge nurse, who took one look at Marlene and said under her breath, She's got the look. Hearing someone else say it validated everything I had been feeling. We prepared equipment just in case. Oxygen adjustments, emergency meds at the bedside, suction ready, everything positioned for quick access but not alarming enough to scare the patient. ICU prep is like orchestrating a performance you hope you never have to perform. You prepare for the worst, quietly, smoothly, almost invisibly. I went back to Marlene and held her hand. We're keeping a close eye on you. Tell me if anything changes, okay? She nodded faintly. Her eyelids fluttered like keeping them open required too much strength. Moments like that stretch time. Every minute feels like 10. Every breath is something you analyze. She drifted in and out of awareness, not confused but tired. Bone-deep tired in a way that made my chest tighten. At 3:42 a.m., her monitors flickered. Not with alarms, not with dramatic changes, but with inconsistencies that told me her body was beginning to struggle. Her respiratory rate dropped slightly. Her heart rate spiked, and then settled unnervingly fast. Her oxygen dipped by just a few points. Subtle, subtle, subtle. But wrong, wrong, wrong. I paged the physician again. You need to come now. He finally came to the unit, still looking unconcerned. But when he stepped into her room and saw her, his expression changed instantly. I saw the moment his medical training caught up with what my instincts had been shouting all night. Okay, he said. Something's happening. Finally. We began interventions. More labs, scans, adjustments in her oxygenation, medication orders. Yet through all of it, she remained eerily calm. Not detached, not confused, calm, like she had expected this moment long before we did. She looked at me once, a steady, knowing gaze, and said, "Thank you for listening earlier." That sentence should not have rattled me the way it did, but it did. It made me feel like she knew more about what was coming than any of us. And then, just as we were increasing her oxygen support, everything shifted. Her breathing hitched. Her expression changed. A wave of fatigue washed over her face so suddenly that I stepped forward without thinking. "Talk to me, Marlene," I said. She opened her mouth but couldn't form the words. Her monitors flickered again, and my instinct screamed, louder than ever, "This is it." I leaned closer, trying to keep her focused, trying to anchor her. "You're here with me, okay? Stay with me." She blinked slowly, and her eyes fixed on mine. Not panicked, not scared, but full of something I still can't describe. And then, her entire body seemed to fold inward. Not dramatically, not violently, but in a quiet collapse that only an ICU nurse would notice. Her shoulders dropped, her eyelids fluttered. Her breathing slipped into a pattern that sent a bolt of electricity through my nerves. The physician stepped forward, but I was already at her bedside, adjusting her oxygen, repositioning her, speaking to her softly, trying to keep her anchored to the moment. "Marlene, stay with me," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. She tried to respond, but the effort seemed to drain the last bit of strength she had carefully rationed all night. Her gaze drifted, not unfocused, but distant, like she was watching something unfold behind the veil of consciousness. The monitors still didn't reflect the severity of what I was seeing. That's the worst part about these moments. The machines always lag behind the reality. They give you numbers, but numbers can't capture the way a body starts letting go. They can't measure the shift in energy, the invisible weight in the air, the instinct that sinks into your bones and says, "Move now." Her oxygen dipped again, a little more this time. The physician ordered interventions, rapid but controlled. Supportive medication, more advanced monitoring, preparing equipment we hoped we wouldn't need. The charge nurse stepped in to assist, reading the room with the same unspoken understanding I had felt the moment Marlene arrived. When a patient gives off that look, The whole unit responds instinctually. It's like a sixth sense we all share. I held Marlene's hand and told her exactly what we were doing, not because she needed the medical explanation, but because patients cling to your voice when their body starts drifting away from them. She squeezed my fingers weakly, so weakly I almost wasn't sure I felt it. And that one small squeeze fueled me more than any alarm could. Her breathing became shallow, her chest rising just enough to keep rhythm, but not enough to reassure anyone. The physician watched her closely now, no longer skeptical of my earlier warnings. He could see what I had been feeling for hours. She was deteriorating, silently, quietly, deceptively. "Let's prepare for escalation," he said. We moved fast but smoothly. Oxygen support increased, lines checked, equipment readied, team positioned. ICU emergencies are strange in the way they unfold. Sometimes everything erupts in seconds. Other times it unravels slowly, like a thread being pulled from the inside out. With Marlene, it was the second kind. Quiet, creeping, predictable only through instinct. She opened her eyes suddenly and looked straight at me. Not at the physician, not at the monitors. At me. "You were right to watch me," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, like wind slipping through a crack. I leaned closer. "What are you feeling now?" She swallowed with effort, her lips trembling slightly. "It's like my body's getting tired of trying." Those words hit me hard. Patients know more about themselves than we give them credit for. When they describe something intangible with that level of clarity, you should never ignore it. The next few minutes stretched into a blur. Her oxygen dipped again. Her heart rate wavered. The monitor still refused to sound a full alarm, but it was behaving just erratically enough to confirm that every instinct I had was justified. Suddenly, her breathing stalled. Not a stop, just a stutter. A pause too long to be normal. I reacted instantly, adjusting her airway support, signaling the team, my voice firm but calm. "Marlene, focus on my voice. Keep breathing. You're here with us." She blinked slowly, her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Her chest rose again, fragile and uncertain. The physician ordered additional interventions. We administered medication. We repositioned her. We monitored every micro-change, every flicker in her vitals, every tremor in her muscles. And through it all, she remained eerily calm, like she knew this fight wasn't one she could muscle through anymore. Then, with no dramatic warning, no flashing alarm, her vitals shifted in a way that made the back of my neck tense. Her oxygen saturation fell just enough to signal that the point of no return was near. Her pulse weakened. Her skin grew paler. I leaned in again, speaking softly, firmly, more human than clinical. "You're not alone. We're right here." Her gaze drifted, then refocused on me, and in a trembling whisper she said, "I knew something would happen tonight." I felt those words deeper than I can explain. They weren't prophetic. They weren't dramatic. They were simply true. She had known. The moment she walked into the ICU, she carried an awareness that something inside her was failing in a way the numbers couldn't quantify. And she had tried to warn us, not with panic, not with fear, but with quiet honesty. Her breathing became inconsistent. Her pulse wavered. The physician initiated the final set of interventions. We worked rapidly, smoothly, each of us moving with the urgency only an ICU team understands. Her body responded weakly, struggling to keep up. I held her hand the entire time, my voice steady in her ear. "You're safe. We're here. Keep fighting." For a moment, just a moment, her breathing steadied. Her pulse strengthened slightly. Her eyes opened just enough for her to meet my gaze again. There was something in her expression I'll never forget. Not fear, not resignation. Gratitude. Pure, quiet gratitude. as if she knew that every instinct I'd had, every decision I'd made, every moment I'd stayed by her side had mattered. And then the wave hit. A subtle but undeniable shift as her body reached the threshold it had been approaching all night. The monitors finally caught up. The alarms began. The physician moved quickly with the final interventions. The team executed every step with precision. We worked as one synchronized unit. But through all the controlled chaos, Marlene's face stayed imprinted in my mind. Her eyes, her calm, her awareness, her trust in me. And then, in the middle of that whirlwind, she squeezed my hand one last time. Just once. Just enough to let me know she heard me. Just enough to let me know she wasn't afraid. What happened next unfolded the way ICU emergencies often do. Fast, technical, focused. And I'll spare the details out of respect for her and for the platform we're on. What matters is that we stabilized her, though barely, and for a moment the room exhaled as one. When the dust settled and the alarms quieted, the physician looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "Good call earlier. You caught this before any of us did." But I wasn't thinking about being right. I wasn't thinking about proving my instincts valid. I was thinking about Marlene, about the moment she walked in, about the look she had, the look I've learned not to ignore, the look I will always respond to. I stayed with her long after the emergency ended. The room felt calmer, but not light. ICU rooms rarely feel light after something like that. They feel suspended, like the air is waiting to settle. She rested quietly, her breathing steadier now, her body supported by everything we could provide. The tension in her face softened, and even though she was too tired to speak, she looked at me once more with the faintest hint of recognition. I smiled gently, brushed a stray hair from her forehead, and said softly, "You did amazing. We're not going anywhere." And she blinked slowly, like she understood. Later that morning, as I gave report to the day shift nurse, she asked me how I knew, how I sensed the change before anything obvious happened. I shrugged, because there's no simple answer. "ICU nurses know the look," I said. She had it the moment she walked in. But the truth runs deeper than that. It's not just the look, it's the instinct, the pattern recognition, the accumulated years of understanding the subtle signs a body gives off long before the machines recognize them. It's the human connection we build in seconds, the ability to see beyond the numbers and into the reality unfolding right in front of us. Marlene reminded me why that instinct matters, why being present matters, why listening, really listening, matters. Her story isn't the dramatic kind people expect from the ICU. There were no explosions of chaos, no cinematic interventions, no wild plot twists. It was quiet, subtle, human. The kind of story that stays with you not because of what happened, but because of how it felt. It reminded me that sometimes the most important thing we do as nurses happens before the alarms, before the numbers fall, before the crisis becomes visible. Sometimes the most important thing we do is simply see someone. And I saw her. I saw her the moment she walked in. And I'll never forget her. Thank you for staying with me through this story. It means more than you know. If you'd like to hear more real experiences from behind the scenes of the ICU, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who would appreciate hearing these kinds of stories. Your support keeps this space alive. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.